Good evening, everyone, and welcome the learned speakers, delegates from various parts of the world. We are here this evening and are going to conduct a webinar discussion on a subject which is of most topical interest. Being the president of NISSMAT, I would like to say a few words about NISSMAT itself. National Institute of Security, Safety, Applied Technology, Management and Applied Technology was established about 3 decades back. We were initially in the process of training in only the subjects which are directly related to the safety and security, as well as to some extent management and applied technology. With the passage of time, our institution became very popular because of the dominance of these subjects in the present scenario of the country, that is security and safety, and also because of the very well-defined, very well-structured our curriculum and our methodology of training. We also imparted training in fire services and also to the defense forces retired personnel who wanted to have private security as a second career. After some time, we thought of training some teams in audits and vigilance. The audit team trained by us conducted audits in risk mitigation, due diligence, and risk management, and became so popular that most of the, I can say without any fear of contradiction, that most of the international firms
You got muted. Mr. Sipal Singh, you got muted somehow. Mr. Sipal Singh, you have got muted.
Someone unmute him yourself.
Kamya, can you unmute him, please?
No, Kamya can do it.
Mr. Sipal, there's a record coming in. I think Pooja is getting a lot of echo.
Yes, sir, because they are making the calls.
And
hello, am I audible now?
yes.
Hello?
Audible now. Audible now.
Okay.
So I was talking about, I was giving a brief about NISSMAT. Now with the passage of time, we have started thinking, and we thought that we should establish a research cell and think tank in our institution so as to design certain events and certain courses on the basis of research to be conducted by us in the field of integrated security technology and also cost-effective security management processes. We are doing that, and we hope with the passage of time, our institute will attain global prominence with the erudite scholars we have with us. And I'm sure that from the webinar which we have conducted, the warm response we are receiving from everyone, we are heading towards becoming a global institution in times to come. A few words about our chairman, Mr. Pawanjit Ahluwalia, also known to most of friends as Captain Pawanjit Ahluwalia. Captain Ahluwalia took retirement, voluntary retirement, as a young captain belonging to the Daredevil Parachute Regiment. He took a risk to launch into the business enterprise, leaving the seduction and safety of an illustrious career in the army. Today, with his continuous perseverance, hard work, honesty, and ethical approach, he has achieved a place of prominence in the business world. He has under his belt the Premier Chief, Premier Investigator, Tax Code, India Skill, and NISSMAT. We are finding him all the time pushing, action-oriented person. Of course, I always think, and I just mentioned in my casual reference earlier, that he is very mild, very sweet, very persuasive. But you don't consider that as weakness, because his persuasiveness and his mildness has got simultaneously the second side, that he can give a thrust to his employees to the extent to get performance. Action oriented. At 10 o'clock, he says, sir, let us talk on this stuff. I say, yaar, main to sone laga. But at the same time, he'll push forward, then I'll respond in the morning. What I'm trying to say is an action oriented. He is an awardee of the Malcolm Thompson Award and Kotalia Award from the CIA. He is a member of the World Association of Detectives. He is a Governor Council member of the Central Association of Private Security Industry. He is also the founder member of International Business Research Administration, Hong Kong. I only want to say a few words about him, or 2 words, that he believes that knowledge without action is to keep your thought in the process of dream. So it doesn't mean he has a knowledge, but he wants knowledge to be translated into action, not only in the thought process. Some of us who have been in the colleges and all, initially associated with the academics and all, we want to keep some processes and thought. No, his thought processes are oriented and activated to the action process. He is the chairman of NISSMAT also. A few words about the subject of today. Now, question is, first of all, let us try to see, let us try to define. I'll leave these things to the erudite speaker as to how they are going to talk about that. But what is cyberspace? In fact, a person like me who is semi-literate as far as the digitalization is concerned, or the digital sphere is concerned, but me also knows that is a sort of common communication space created and being used through internet and other such equipments all over the world. So this is a sort of global space. And this global space is getting more and more excessively used. And with the passage of time, it is getting almost, for those who do not have much affinity with the physical, it is a mirror image sort of thing for all those who are working on offline. The cyberspace is a mirror image for them. Most of them who are online, they're using it as a mirror. But the problem is that whereas in the case of physical misuse, one can at times treat them or have better curative action. Now, in this case, it is basically on internet, and thus it is little difficult to check its abuses. It is known very well that as far as the children are concerned, at their adolescence age and at the stage which is a formative stage, they get affected. Why? Because they are genius as far as the internet is concerned. they can go anywhere. If there is a misuse, the misuse is by those who are either money seekers or who are unethical or who have something else to do. So sometimes they get into their sort of grooming process. The grooming process itself leads to the abuses of the children or children abuse. Sometimes they ask them to have chats. So there are a lot of methods I'm not going to detail, with the result that the adolescent and the young brain is abused. When these, sometimes there's a broadcasting of the sexual abuse of the children. This mentally, psychologically affects them. At times it also affects them physically. But what to do about it? Only way is that there have to be checks and balances. There are both sides of the coin. It has definitely, my cyberspace and use of cyber has definitely many advantages. But the risks are there. The risk involved, particularly in the age group which is belonging to adolescents and children, is much more. And therefore, there have to be checks and balances on that. We have got, as far as India is concerned, we have got IT Act. We have got also IPC offenses, which also control these things. But enforcement of these acts is rather difficult because it needs a lot of evidentiary value to go. Although nowadays evidentiary value is coming, but it becomes a little difficult for them to take it to the ultimate conclusion of convictions. Therefore, what is desired is that it has to be, a consciousness has to be created in the society, the institutions, the parents, the users, organizations, they should all emphasize, and they should also bring home that these abusive use of cyberspace being abusively used, unethically being used for the children is very dangerous for the society at large. Now for this, we require what? We require certainly a very efficient check. We also require very ethical checks. We also require very effective checks. Now, when you want efficient, ethical, and effective checks, then it comes to the scholars who are in it. Learned speakers are in that field, and they will deliberate and tell us as to how to be efficient, ethical, because you can't stop it. You can't stop it because it is not done. You can't stop irrespective of the acts of privacy, etc., which are there, irrespective of the fact the constitutional right of privacy is there. Yet there are abuses, and therefore you can't deny them the space. Yet there has to be checks and balances, and it is up to the learned speaker who will deliberate on this and make us wiser. I'm very sure the delegates attending the webinar today will have many carry homes with them after they have heard the learned speaker. I'll now pass on the proceedings to Captain Pawan Ahluwalia to go ahead and introduce the speakers and moderate the session. Mr. Pawan Ahluwalia, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. First, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of a lot of participants from different countries and across the world. We have today participants from India, the United States, Singapore, UAE, Nigeria, Bangladesh, United Kingdom, Pakistan, Bahrain, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Ireland, Kenya, New Zealand, Oman, Poland, and Spain. Thank you very much for registering from all over the world. This is a subject of great interest to everyone. I'd also take a minute to thank Tag Scores for being the sponsors of this webinar today. Tag Scores is an online assessment and examinations platform which is gaining prominence in many parts of the world today. And I'd also like to thank the companies that have supported this event: Premier Shield, India Skills, Premier Consulting and Investigations, JMD Cargo, and HubSpot. Before I introduce the speaker of the day, I'd like to say a word about our president. Our president is a very illustrious senior police officer from India. He's a master's in English literature, and he served in very senior appointments across the country. He was made responsible by the government of India to raise a new force called the Rapid Action Force. He was appointed the first chief of this elite police force in India. He later raised and then headed the Internal Security Academy, a central police academy at Mount Abu in Rajasthan, one of the states in India. During his service career, he has been decorated with the President's Police Medal, with the Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Service, and several other medals and honors that the government of India could bestow on him. After retirement, he's been very actively involved with business and various associations. He was awarded by the President of India as the Security Personality for the Year in 2009. And thereafter, he has been recognized for his service by various governors of various states in India. He's also the Honorary Director General for CAPSI, which is the Central Association of Private Security Industry in India, and the Association of Private Detectives. He's also the advisor to the Asian Professional Security Association. Mr. Sipal Singh gets interviewed very frequently by the Indian television. So he's a very familiar face on the Indian television screen for his opinion on various subjects of topical interest. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our president. Now, the first speaker of the day is Mr. Keith Elliott from Toronto in Canada. Keith is the CEO of Reed Research, a professional investigation firm in Toronto, Canada. He has an honors degree in law and security administration. Keith also heads the Reed Cyber Intelligence Unit. Keith is an internationally recognized investigator and public speaker. He frequently provides training and his expertise at schools to train and protect children, while educating parents about the dangers of the cyber world, the password safety, and social media. His firm assists corporations and individuals while working with law enforcement to stop cyberbullying, cyber harassment, and child exploitation to ensure children remain safe digitally and personally. As a seasoned professional investigator with over 29 years of experience, Mr. Elliott has practical involvement in identifying risk and investigating crimes. He has presented evidence and testified in precedent-setting cases in various courts in Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you Keith Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Aliwala. I appreciate it. And thank you to NISSMAT and the entire board for having me here. It's a great privilege and an honor. Good evening, everyone. And for those of you that aren't in that time frame, good afternoon and good morning. So I'm going to provide a lot of information, and I think that visual is a great aid, especially when we're dealing with multiple languages, different levels of interpretation of English or otherwise. So I will share a fair bit of info while I speak over top of it. And I'm happy to provide this information after the fact. I understand that this is being recorded, so you can utilize the resources that I provide. This is only a starting point. This is just a little bit of an eye-opener to realize what we're dealing with and how we can prevent a few things from happening. If we can stop one child from being exploited, then we've won. And every time we do this, if we can stop another one or two more, then that's what matters at the end of this. If you take away one thing from this today, then I've achieved my goal and we can move forward from there. So in the spirit of time, we're going to jump right into this, and away we go with protecting children in cyberspace. Now, cyberspace is an interesting term. As Mr. Singh said earlier, it is a global phenomenon. We speak across the globe around this, and ultimately it affects everybody individually, and how this individually affects people and children globally. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, let's define cyberspace as most of us know it. We know the all-encompassing Google, the search engine that brings us to cyberspace. With that, we want to ensure that what's happening? How old is the internet? First of all, where has this phenomenon come from? Well, roughly the internet itself is 32 years old, whereas WWW, World Wide Web, is about 27 years old, created in Surin, Geneva, Switzerland, and processed from there. When we think about how big the internet is, this is quite staggering. It's over 1.5 billion web pages. Now that's an individual web page. NISSMAT is one web page. Read Research is another web page. Any of the relevant sponsors, they all have their unique web pages. However, less than 2 million of those are active at a given time. So there's a lot of information out there, and how do we filter through that? The most important aspect about the internet is when we think about it, if we were to burn a piece of paper, it's gone forever. In the internet, information lasts. It's difficult to permanently delete any information. So if there's inappropriate photos of children out there, if there's information that's been said about somebody, that lasts. It stays there and it recycles itself through and through different layers of the internet on how that is processed. So we need to understand that what keeps us safe in all of this is our passwords. Our passwords are the number one thing to keep ourselves and our children safe from being exploited. A lot of you are familiar with the terms of whether it be a cyber breach or ransomware, account takeovers. All of those things happen as a result of inappropriate use of passwords, where individuals have passwords that are reused multiple times and are compromised on various different levels. So with that is the difficulty of how do we have unique passwords for a variety of different places? Well, first of all, we have to have some password protocol in place. The longer, the better the password is. There's approximately 40 usable keys on a keyboard. And if you count upper and lower case, that would be for one key password, there's 80 possibilities. Beyond that, if we had 80 possible passwords times 3, it's 500,000 password possibilities. Now, if we take that to 10, this is where size matters. 10 character password gives us that variable options of cracking a password. It's more than a quadrillion. So when we look at that, size is really important. On the bigger the password, the more likely we are to be safe. The other thing we need to think about is, instead of a password, we want to think of a passphrase. So how do you remember these? How do you figure these out? Well, the best way to establish this is something called a root password. So I'll take something that's very unique to me, and I'm not giving away any secrets here. Nobody's going to be able to access my passwords. This is just an example I use for teaching. So if you look at the example there that's provided on the screen, what it says is Keith Elliott plus Helen Murphy, my wife, equals 3 children. That's my root password in this particular example. I'll always remember that, but it adheres to simple criteria with respect to uppercase, lowercase, characters, and numbers, which is usually what we have to have in all root passwords. If you add then the first 3 or 4 characters of a website to that, example NISSMAT is, it would be NIS and then KE plus HM equals 3. There's a unique password every time I visit NISSMAT. Now you can do that at the front, at the beginning, in the middle, wherever you want to put it. But every time you visit a different web page, it's going to be unique. So you have your root password plus the web page you're visiting. It's going to be unique for that particular words. So an example for most of the audience here, if we could figure out that root password, if you paused about it long enough, you would figure it out. It's a very famous individual from India, and it translates into be the change equals Mahatma Gandhi. So very easy to remember, right? Very simple and straightforward on that. If I put this one out there, a lot of characters, the one, it says I, and then the less than sign with the 3 is often obviously a heart for a lot of the kids that text and things. So what that says is, I love Rohit Sharma and cricket. So very easy to remember if you find a passphrase. On the simplest level in the world, we tell our children every night before they go to bed, you need to brush and floss before bed. So when you're doing your teeth, you need to brush your teeth and floss your teeth before you go to bed. Very simple ways to create a passphrase that ultimately allows you to remember different passwords. The one that I have there, for example, is Keith Elliott married Helen Murphy equals 3 kids and 1 dog. There's my criteria of being long. It's 11 characters long. The sun would burn out before you were ever able to crack that password. So size matters. Now, when we look at the variety of resources that are out there, these are the icons of the children in our world. They don't look at a conventional keyboard. They see a keyboard like this. We don't know what half these icons are, but I guarantee you our children could identify every individual icon here. Snapchat, TikTok, Google Maps, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn. Now I teach on that, so I know that, but I don't expect everybody else to do. But these are the resources in the realm that our children are operating in, and therefore the realm that the pedophiles and the bad actors are operating in. So the number one resource of how bad actors permeate our system and put our children at risk is social media. And so we need to think of the restrictions associated with social media and these platforms is who can use social media, what age is appropriate. Social media has set some standards with respect to that, and they have told you straight up that stereotypically you need to be at least 13 to utilize social media. So the other question to that is, can you use someone else's name? Now you're not supposed to. It's in the end user agreement with Facebook that you're not supposed to use fake accounts. Well, we have some accounts here that we utilize. Bad actors live and breathe on the internet. And there's an anonymity with respect to that because nobody can know who they are. They can pretend to be somebody else. And everybody questions this. And I'm going to give you an example in a second. There is tons of content for them. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit on the internet that allows them to access this information. There's a lot of easy targets. People don't know how to properly protect themselves. They're vulnerable individuals like children, and they're easy to prey on. They are allowed to play out their fantasies. They live in an alternate reality where the internet is this world that they can do whatever they want because stereotypically there is no rules. And the last part is it's very difficult to catch these individuals because of jurisdictional issues. We're talking on a global platform here right now in Zoom and YouTube, and that's reaching the globe. So how do I address somebody that's in Colombia or India or Ireland or even on the other side of Canada or in a different jurisdiction of Canada? It's very, very difficult. And so governments and corporations and politicians all need to cooperate together to make sure that this doesn't happen. Now, this is an example of an account that we utilize for undercover operations. And if you look at this young lady, she looks fairly normal. She's posting issues with respect to COVID that we're all dealing with. She's stockpiling toilet paper, and she's quite an attractive young lady. So that would be quite interesting. Now, if my teenage sons were out there looking at this and she tried to friend them, they would probably say yes, because who wouldn't, right? Like, she's there. But you don't know who she is because that's who she really is. That's one of my cyber team operatives. That's Mr. Brad True. And that's who really operates this account for the interest of keeping children safe.
Explains why.
Just like everything else, photos are valuable to pedophiles.
Houston Police Sergeant Luis Menendez Sierra investigates online child sex crimes. He wants you to know pedophiles are swiping through social media with the rest of us.
They're online, always looking for new images and videos. And sometimes when we serve a search warrant at the house, the person is sitting at a desk, right, with their computer, and they haven't gotten up in maybe a month. They literally will use buckets and jars to urinate and defecate because there's a likelihood if they get up to go use the restroom, they might miss the opportunity at an image that just popped up for a second or so.
They're searching for snapshots of kids posing, children in swimsuits, babies in diapers.
So just imagine that person is, a picture like that is gold to them. And they're waiting for someone to post it.
Pictures that most of us wouldn't think twice about. like first day of school photos. They're looking for details like full names and a school's location.
I know your mom, this is her name. She told me to come pick you up.
Has
You
that
know,
ever happened?
That's definitely happened, yes.
These innocent photos also work like a legal loophole because they're not child porn.
So we wouldn't be able to like charge them for having that picture, but it's scary that they do have that picture.
Part of protecting children from pedophiles
It's just safer to just not put your entire life on social media.
means pausing before we post.
So I think that's crucial too. When we think about what we post out there, we're constantly throwing out photos of our children and where they're at and what they're doing and what school they go to. And those are all things that the bad actors, the pedophiles, the criminals or otherwise use to exploit our children. They'll come up and say, hi, I know your mom. She told me to come see you or whatever. On the simplest level, there is hundreds of applications out there that we utilize on our devices every day. We don't go without our phones. We always have these with us 24/7. So what I'm going to point out a few that I think are the biggest offenders, and I'm sorry if this offends anyone that utilizes these apps or otherwise, but this is well documented in what's out there. So number one out there is a one stated as IMVU, and it's a 3D avatar based application that allows for role playing, which is what sexual predators and pedophiles love to utilize. There's role playing of all kinds in that. The chat rooms are not moderated and bullying and influence is rampant. Clothing is intentionally skimpy and questionable and pervasive, and they love to portray themselves as they're focusing on love and romance. The next one after that is Whisper. It's targeted to young adults and teens to share special secrets. Whisper doesn't allow for names or ages or locations or anything else. And over 1 million individual users have identified themselves as being 15 or younger on this particular app. And posts are centered around questionable behavior and even possibly solicitation with respect to activities. Then we have Kix. Kix is a messaging app that's mostly anonymous. Very easy for predators and common for people to lie about what they're utilizing. There's actually thousands of documented cases of kidnappings, assaults, murders have been linked to this messaging app because it is anonymous. So it has been involved thousands of sexual abuse cases in the United Kingdom alone. And there's absolutely zero reason for children to have this app on their telephone. Next is Tinder. It's a dating app. It's known to be for allowing people to hook up in an inappropriate manner. Now, this is fine for consenting adults, but it's not appropriate for children. You fail to have consent, to have the effective age, and it's a casual sex culture is encouraged in these apps. Again, not an app that children should be having on their telephone. Next is OkCupid. Now, it does it under the guise of matchmaking philosophies. However, there's big potential for exploitation here with older adults, sexual predators. Individuals are encouraged to sext each other, which is sex messages sent via text. Solicitation, transmission of inappropriate content is shared on this app. There's a lot of references in that regard. And one of the worst ones out there, in my opinion, is one known as Chatspin. It's a random video chat where you can literally talk to strangers. You literally connect your computer to live feeds, which makes it very easily to be exposed to real life sexual content scenarios. There's unwanted sexual advances on individuals, and ultimately, it's extremely dangerous for children or anyone under the consenting age that we want to be careful with. So some common sense rules when we're utilizing individuals. Mental health. So some common sense rules that are there. If you don't want it to be there, don't post it. Don't identify yourself or your personal details. Never take questionable photos. Don't make friends with online strangers. You wouldn't make friends with online strangers or take some food from somebody or help them find their puppy dog in the real world. Don't do it online. If they're not a friend that you haven't met in person, they're not a friend. Somebody that you met online and you physically don't know who they are is not your friend. In addition to that, as parents, our job to keep our children safe, our number one job as a parent is to teach our children and to keep them safe. So number one is parenting is not a popularity contest. I don't care if your children get upset about what you're going to restrict from them or what you take away from them in the way of apps or whatever. Quite simply is parenting is not a popularity contest. So my number rule, I have 3 children. And my first rule with all my children when they were teens and they had social media is I must be your friend on all your accounts. That way I can monitor what's going on. I can see what you're posting or not posting. Number 2 is I controlled the access and the amount of usage. I kept the router for my internet in my bedroom. And when I went to bed at night, I unplugged the router because nobody should be on it past 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Now I have young adults now, so it doesn't work that way. And they're a lot more educated. But when they were children, they don't need to be online at 12 o'clock or 1 in the morning. It's not relevant. You must know the person you friend. And when I say know them, it's not a friend of a friend, or it's not Bobby's friend or somebody else's friend that knows them. You have to have met them. You need to check it and you need to be proactive. And the last thing is, in my household, I own all these. There's 5 of them and I own all of them because I can control them that way. The children don't own the phone, and then that way you can control what's being utilized on that device. There are real consequences if we just ignore this and think our children are going to be safe and don't get involved. And they make the headlines, unfortunately. A teenage girl kills herself in Malaysia because she's seeking attention and wants to see how popular she is. And she throws out there, well, maybe I should just kill myself. Unfortunately, 69% of the population said, yeah, you should. So she did. That is cyberbullying, and it's very scary, real consequence. In Canada, we had one of the first cases globally where a young lady shared an inappropriate photo of herself topless, and that got posted online, and she was bullied and tormented to the point of where she committed suicide as a result of that, because of the exposure of herself online. And she took an embarrassing photo that would just never go away. The internet lasts. In Malaysia, TikTok star commits suicide because she didn't think she was popular enough. She wasn't getting enough likes or feeds, and I'm just annoying everybody, so I'm going to end it. And then finally, in India itself, a 17-year-old girl committed suicide as a result of the intimate photos that ended up in Facebook. These are real consequences. These are real scenarios when we don't act appropriately with respect to that. So how do we keep our children safe? What are some of the ways to do that? One of the best is share my location, and you can look it up via that link on Apple, support.apple.com. There's some screenshots on that. You can share with your family. Samsung has different devices, and there's also applications that allow you to do this. What it essentially does is you create a family plan, and you have members in your family that share your location, so you can see where your children are at any given point. You can see if they're going to their friends or otherwise. This is a rule in my household, even to this day. It's a good way to keep people safe. Stereotypically, we always have our phone with us. So we want to make sure that this is working across all parameters and we can keep our children safe. The next one on that is you would choose when you can share. As an adult, I don't need my children to know where I am every given moment. My children don't have that option. So they're always being shown where I can see them, and I'll be able to utilize how they are. You can walk through this and check it out later at your own speed. And then beyond that is you can go through your settings on which device you share your location from. And you should be doing it from the physical phone or any device they utilize and where you want to use those platforms. Lastly is how to share it, how to turn it off. If you've lost your device, you can remotely erase your device if there's content on that or photos that you don't want people to find if your phone's stolen or lost. Again, another really great resource to be able to keep people safe. I'm about a minute away from being completed, but I'll leave you with these few no's as well. Self-destructing or secret apps. These are apps that don't leave a message in the inbox. They basically, you send a message and it disappears after 10, 15, 30 seconds. These are not ways that your children should be communicating. If they're communicating in a manner where they don't want anybody to say it, then or see it, then they shouldn't be utilizing it. You should never tell a secret to somebody that you don't want to say out loud to the world. These apps allow for secret communication, and they are Snapchat, Burn Note, Whisper, and Yik Yak. Your children should not be communicating in any of these platforms or on any of these platforms between each other because they're doing it to hide something. So again, it's our responsibility as a parent to eliminate that. There's a great reference on that. If you go to commonsensemedia.org, there's a good resource there for you that you can review and look at. And finally, there's hidden content apps. And these pop up on phones where individuals can hide inappropriate photos of themselves, whether it be in the form of a calculator, a texting app, volume control, or utilities. The tip I'll give you is on an Apple phone in particular, when you press your home button on your phone and the apps start to wiggle and they jiggle, these apps don't wiggle because they have another content in behind them. So you'll know that it's a fake app. It's just a front because it's just an image. The real app is in behind that. And when you click into that, that'll be the part that's wiggling. So just like a file doesn't wiggle on the desktop, these don't wiggle either. So I'm going to defer now to my illustrious colleague, Dr. Watalia, and let her speak for a little bit. And I thank you all. I wish I had some more time. This is a very passionate topic about me. I'm very focused on keeping children safe and preventing pedophiles and individuals and bad actors from having that. So hopefully some of the information I gave you today prevents that from happening in future. And I will bid you adieu and let the rest of my colleagues continue from this point forward.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much. You'll have to wait for the question and answers, which I'm sure going to be so many of them for you.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Amita Mullah Watal. She's a global educationist. She's the principal of one of the most important schools in Delhi. That's the Springdale School. She manages the Springdale School in Jaipur and has also been the founder principal of the Springdale School in Dubai. She's the chairman of Global Inclusive Education Network. She's also on the National Advisory Committee, which is constituted by the Center for Disability Studies and Action. And she's the former chairman of the National Progressive Schools Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Amita Mullah Watal.
Thank you so very, very much. I hope that I'm audible to everybody.
Absolutely, yes.
Great. So before anything else, I want to say, Keith, what a fantastic presentation that was. So clear and so concise and so informative that there's so much take back that I'm going to have for my students, for people around me. And I'm surely going to pick your brain again, Keith, to speak to the students. That was really awesome. Thank you.
Just to let you know, we have a speakers forum, Amita, which you and Keith automatically would get added on to.
Lovely.
So, you have a larger interaction that you can do with all the speakers on NISSMAT.
Super. Thank you so much. I'd like to start off by saying that I'm deeply honored that Mr. Sipal Singh, President NISSMAT, had me here, especially because when Pawan, who has been a friend over ages, I don't think I remember a time when I wasn't a friend, and someone who I value and respect deeply. Thank you for having me. I would also like to say good evening and hello again to the General, General Lumba, Mr. Pandit, of course, my panelist friend and colleague, Keith Elliott, and others who are here on this webinar. And how can I forget this very young, innovative, and progressive young man, Jasjeet Ahluwalia, someone I have always sort of interacted with and found extremely expressive and articulate. So thank you very much again, and it's been a great time listening to Keith's deliberations. I'd like to start by saying that in today's world, we are so deeply interconnected, either by default or by choice. And this leads to an extremely interconnected life. Now, I'm going to do a double whammy today because Keith has spoken about, he's spoken about the kind of nitty-gritty of what password to do and what we need to know and so on. I'm going to give a sort of a larger focus on how we have to protect our children, sometimes from themselves and sometimes from others. So we have to look at how do we take this forward, because our private spaces have been completely deconstructed as a result of the attitudes and values that we as people have developed. And I mean, all the time, from dawn to dusk, we are navigating likes, we are navigating emojis, we are navigating thumbs ups, and we are always obsessing as to whether we are having people connected with us. And sometimes we are putting our lives on hold for this, for just waiting for one message to come. We don't sleep nights. And this especially happened during the COVID time. So instead of looking at cyber security, I think I would like to replace that terminology as far as children are concerned with cyber accountability and cyber responsibility, because that's a very integral part of cyber security. Because where children are concerned, or anybody, when you talk about bans and you talk about securities and you talk about a no-no situation, there is more curiosity involved in it. People want to indulge in it. People want to see why is that we should have things secure, especially children and adolescents. The moment you say, no, this isn't good for you, they will go ahead and do it. But that's how the young and the restless have lived. And that's how I think even we as young adolescents lived. So we have to now put it across on its head. Now, the problem is that the markets don't want us to be secure because they need us. The markets need us. They need us to decipher our personal space. They need us to know our likes and dislikes. They need us to ensure what are our feelings, what are our emotions, because through us, they sell and they sell it back to us. We're actually the products, and we don't understand that. We think we are buying a product, but we are the product. And the market is the biggest insecure space that you will find. And I think there we have to ensure how, because we are perpetually on the market. And so I think, as Keith rightly said, that technology has permeated every aspect of our lives through Snapchat, through Twitter, through WhatsApp. Now, somebody said WhatsApp is going off, so Telegram and Signal. And I mean, we just don't want to get off. If we don't have WhatsApp, we'll jump into Signal and Telegram. So what's happened is that the corona has sort of accelerated what should have happened in 20 years, 30 years to today. And the reality of today is that we have become human beings which are completely controlled by algorithms. And that is a very insecure space. And so how do we look at this? Because at every point, there is an algorithm that is taking a decision in our lives. Even in democratic societies, without any government coercion, we are willing to entrust everything we have to an algorithm. And we're giving them complete authority over ourselves. Netflix tells us what to watch all the time. Google tells us where to go. Amazon tells us what to buy. Shadi.com tells us who to marry. Soon somebody will be telling us who to vote for. It's coming. And then somebody will tell us where to live. Somebody will tell us, and of course you have that whole thing about the Naukri.com, the job to take. And all the time we are putting up all the material that we have on these sites. And so what is happening? In this way, we're going to be controlled completely by a digital dictatorship. And children are perpetually involved with this kind of space. Now, interestingly, during the Industrial Revolution, exploitation was what happened to people. With technology, we are all afraid that we'll become irrelevant. And so irrelevance is making us consistently connect with technology. And I think we have to walk this tightrope and balance ourselves between the whole understanding of digital security and digital safety. How do we do that? How do we change this kind of disruption? Because as I said earlier, that everything has changed, the jobs, the economy, and as I said, what happened every 10 years is now happening in 2 to 3 years. So the most important goal of education, and I'm speaking as an educator, is that we have to develop our emotional intelligences, because we will need a lot of mental balance, a lot of resilience to deal with these technological aberrations that we will have to face. And they are going to come towards us in a big manner. And I would like to, at this point, do a screen share, if I may. A screen share, right. Is this, is it, can you see it?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
see.
I just want to sort of, I would just like to do, what is it called? You can see it, right? But you're not being able to see it through, you're not being able to see it through, right. Can you see it, Jasjeet, now? I would like to sort of, yes, thank you very much for that. So what are we looking here? We have choices and challenges, and there are 7 billion of us and 7 billion agendas that we have. And how do we go forward in this whole context? You know, we also have to look at a very important part before we get involved with cybersecurity, which is that a lot of children's lives are being taken over by technology. You must have heard that in Japan, there is an illness called hikikori, where people haven't left their homes for years and everything is being taken in. And all the time, whether they are eating or sleeping or shopping, they're not leaving their homes. Now, a lot of parents are consistently telling me that what do we do? Our children have lost their lives to technology. Now, this is a very worrying kind of a situation. And so what do we see? That the personal spaces of children have been taken over in a big way by cyberspace. And so how do we sort of reinvent this? How do we reinvent children? Because we've got stuck in a matrix-like situation, if you've seen the movie, The Matrix. And so today, how do we bring children even back to school? Because we are ready, everybody's ready, but children don't want to come back to school. And half the time, it is because they have been doing assessments on the internet through online classes, which is not fair. Unfair assessments have been going on. Learning gaps have increased in a huge way, as a result of which their assessment that has come to us through the rubrics has been incorrect. They don't want to come back because they're afraid of coming back to school and being assessed in the real way. So the online classroom itself has created issues with security because there's a lot of dishonesty being involved in doing work and in carrying on with tests and examinations. So that itself is a situation. I think whatever apps are there outside, it's very difficult to check because children and adolescents work around these apps and do these things. Now, even in different aspects, socio-political aspects, children feel very connected to the cyberspace because a lot of young adolescents who talk to me say that the hugest youth movements happen because of cyberspace and they don't want to leave it. So whether it was the Yellow Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, whether it was the Arab Spring or the Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, these are all young movements and young people today have great control over these things. And they would like very much to be a part of. So it's very difficult to get people off by saying that, you know, you should follow this or that. So I think the most essential thing that we're looking at is what is this age that we're looking at? Because right now, children have been forced in a way to be involved in education 4.2, where the whole education is based on blended learning. It's based on technology. It's based on sort of synchronous learning. So how do we get out of that? How do we involve ourselves in telling children that, you know, this is what, how do you draw the lines? And so I think the most important thing is that we have to start looking at information literacy because information is highly abundant and highly contested at the same time. And so how does a child balance information that is coming across? Because technology is rewinding the entire process of evolution, you know, and as Keith rightly mentioned, that these low-hanging fruits of technology, whether it's a child is doing 5 things at a time, he's texting, he's gaming, he's coding, he's looking at big data. Now, at that point, what do we see? Sometimes all sort of pornography pops up when children are involved. And we've seen that happen. And it's even if a child is not into a pornographic site, the pornography pops up. And it's very difficult how to get it off. And so what kind of firewalls should be used? What kind of nannies have to be brought in place by parents and such? In fact, it's a ridiculous advertisement that I saw a couple of months ago where a woman is giving birth to a child and a child comes out and he cuts his own umbilical cord because he sees how to do that on a tablet, takes the tablet and runs off while the mother is waiting to put the child in her arms. Now, this is a ridiculous ad. And I think in India, we've gone a little over the top as far as technology is concerned. I would like to say to you, Keith, that, you say that you have control over your phones. In India also, parents are the one whose names are are registered in those phones. And yet there is no understanding of what is happening in their children's lives. And so I think today the Silicon Valley professionals are not handing over devices to their children because they're fearing that, there's an issue or obsession. So let me get into this issue. I mean, there are children and there are adults who are involving themselves with artificial intelligences in a huge manner. And we are seeing that there is a sort of a satellite imageries. You can find out in Africa with coaching. You can do voice recognition through Denmark. In Boston, researchers have found, patients and reduced certain diseases because of that. There are early signs of diabetes. So I'm giving you the good side of what can happen through proper usage. But at the same time, I think we have to look at the difficult issues that come up due to cyberspace. And that is the physical, social, and emotional. I see huge issues of cyberbullying, trolling, cyber grooming, body shaming, stalking, phishing, morphing. And in India, we had that episode of the boys' locker room, where you had a girl who sort of put up a name of a young man and took on a false identity. And that boy was not the person who was part of the boys' locker, and he couldn't take it. And he was from grade 10 and he jumped off the roof, which is so tragic because after all, we are playing with people's lives. And so there has to be a lot of care in this. And also there are issues with children and young adults about issues of copyrights and hacking and plagiarism. Because children are sometimes this kind of work is being done. And as schools, we're trying our hardest to create situations, bring in apps where plagiarism is not being done. Because later on, if a child develops an attitude to pick up material and pass it as their own, and this is especially happening recently, a publishing house, I was working, not Penguin, another publishing house that I was involved with, said that there was a lot of novels that were coming up from children and reading material, and they wanted to print it, but 90% of it was plagiarized. And so, as I said, we have to protect children from themselves also. That's an integral part of who they are, and bring in ethics into cyberspace. And that's very, very essential. And as Keith said, the digital footprint, I mean, there's been issues when a vice president of a company in Bangalore was not taken for a particular job of being a vice president because many years ago, he put up something abusive about women on the cyberspace. And so again, to remind them that the whole idea of Bond's film, that diamonds are forever, it's no more diamonds are forever, it's digital footprints are forever. And so it's very, very essential that we look at that and we monitor what our children are doing in cyberspace. So where we can have hackers, because children every day are saying, Ma'am, I want to do coding. Coding has become a very big thing, but coding also helps you to hack, and it gives you, and a lot of children are doing courses with hacking. So how do we convert that into ethical hacking? Because all sort of issues can come up with hacking. In fact, Kevin Mitnick is a very well-known ethical hacker who works with children and who is a magician and yet on a social media and guides children. We have our own Omkar Sonawale, who's the youngest Indian hacker, but he's an ethical hacker at the age of 17. And we have the youngest hacker who worked for Microsoft at the age of 5, started his work. So we have to look at all these issues as educators. So how do we prevent this? How do we bring in ethics into children's lives and prevent these things from happening? And as parents, how do we ensure that they're not plagiarizing, they're not involving in hacking and so on? And so these are just some data of Facebook breached in 267 million, and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube all hacked and breached, and many of it has been breached by young adults. And so we have to ensure that the cyberspace is more human. And so let's see, how do we develop cyber awareness and hygiene? We talk to our children. We should notice indicators of change in behavior, because the secretive attitude, the social emotional issues that come. Protect our children from cyber grooming. I've had so many issues where girls have been abused and they have become introverted. They had to go to psychiatrists and psychologists to get away from this and haven't been the same again. And again, I said, let's not click suspicious links or attachments. Let's cover our webcams. Let's install antivirus softwares with parental consent, Norton or NetNannies or KidLoggers or Zoodles, and there's so many more that can be spoken of, as my friend in the earlier presentation said. And let's keep our software updated. And let's secure browser settings. I think it's very important to secure browsers. And then be selective about accepting friends' requests from strangers in social media. Secure this. Learn how to block people who are making us uncomfortable. A lot of young people do not know how to get out of this discomfort zone, and they don't know how to block people. They don't know how to remove, and it's important to remove people who are, who are hassling you. And I think you don't have to respond to every tweet that comes towards you. The whole idea of tweeting has also become a big thing amongst young people. And so not because the moment you start responding to tweets, it becomes a huge storm of tweets. And then it attacks you and you become part of that trolling. There have been so many instances that people talk about it. And I won't get into passwords because Keith has talked enough about passwords. Let's disable location services for social media and sites. Refrain from sharing personal information like photos and emails and photographs, even with known and unknown people. Why? Unknown, even known. Let's consult relatives and friends if we are being cyber stalked. A lot of children do not share. So I think parents have to keep their eyes open, as I said, for change of attitudes and so on.
Amita, just 2 minutes more, please.
Right. So let's help in working together, in sharing network resources, in being honest and trustworthy, and honoring our property rights and copyrights, and give proper credit for all that we do. I think the most important thing is to develop our EQ, IQ, SQ, and AQ, the adversarial quotient, the social quotient, and the emotional quotient, which will help us with all this. I just want to tell you that cyberspace is a place where we should use partnerships and alliance, move from self-centered existence to coexistence, from confrontation to interaction, and from alienation to cooperation. And so it's up to us. Does it become a weapon or a tool of connectivity? It's our choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amita. What a wonderful talk you've given, and I thank both the speakers. I have a couple of questions. People want to ask questions, but I'm going to sort of start with one question myself first. They say digital world is a dark, dangerous place for children. What are your comments, Keith, on this?
Sorry, which application I missed?
The digital world is a dark, dangerous place for children. What are your comments on this?
I agree and I disagree. I agree that the dark, dangerous place exists, but I think that it doesn't need to be. I think that the technology exists such that we can eliminate the dark, dangerous place with proper education and empowering our youth not to go down that rabbit hole and to focus on the benefits of interaction globally, like we are here in this platform that didn't exist 5 years ago, where we can see everybody around the globe simultaneously, and embrace that for the good as opposed for the bad. Like anything in life, it's your perception on what you choose to take out of it. And you could see something that is rotten or otherwise, or you could see a perfect flower. The choices on that are yours. And the internet is no different than that, is that we can use it and it is a fabulous tool, but it needs to be regulated and moderated, and we need to be educated on it. We cannot just hand a child a phone and let them do whatever they want on it. You wouldn't give them the keys to a car without giving them proper driver's licenses or otherwise, you wouldn't give them a loaded handgun without teaching them proper safety on a handgun and not to point it at people and all the rest of it. So why do we do it on the internet?
Thank you so much. And now I have one more question for Meeta. You know, in your schools, there was a rush to start up distance learning. And the schools did not have proper child safety guarding policies in place. How did you go about it in your school?
Well, I think that would be sort of, I don't know whether I cannot speak for every school, but I will be definitely speaking for progressive schools, of which I have been the chairman, and there have been many, many progressive schools in the country who, even before the coronavirus came in, had safeguards, had firewalls, but then you have to remember that we cannot do that because the children are in their homes. And they were doing online learning from home. So we had a series of cybersecurity specialists who came in the first week itself and guided parents as to the kind of apps that can be utilized and can be embedded within their systems to ensure that children, were sort of safe from issues like this and were able to have online learning without any kind of challenges. So whether it was our school space, because there was no school at that point of time, the school was in every teacher's home. The school was in every child's home. And so these specialists really helped us and helped parents because they were at sea themselves to ensure that these challenges were being met with. And we had these helplines, we had call centers created from teachers in case issues came up like this. And we had these hub schools that we were connected with each other, immediately helping and assisting if any kind of issue came up with these, with any kind of security breaches. We had Pavan Duggal, who was a cyber specialist, who was on the board, and we had several other people like that who came in and helped out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, may I ask the president to ask his first question? He has some exciting question to ask.
This question is for our speaker from Canada. There's no doubt, I mean, very, very, very illustrative and very educative talk you have given, but I want to ask one question. One is to create an umbrella around you or a protective umbrella around you so that we are around the children or note their psychological behavior in the initial stage and try to control it. That is, you are trying to create an umbrella around you. The other is the eradication of predators and unethical employees. They are two different things. How to eradicate in this technical age? You mentioned that the predators and the unethical elements with lot of apps you have referred to are there. How to eradicate them? How to get rid of them in this age? Because the compromising is all right, but question is it possible to eradicate?
I don't think it's possible to eradicate. There's always going to be bad. You have to have the yin with the yang, unfortunately, in society. So I think the bigger issue is prevention and education with respect to that. And yes, if you create an umbrella around yourself and protect those that are near and dear around you, then that's going to help. But you are never going to eradicate. It's like the proverbial rats. If you turn on the lights, they scurry, right? And they're going to find a different dark place to go to. So I don't know if it's possible to eradicate in a free environment where social media and digital realms are amplified. As my illustrious colleague said, Dr. Wattal, is that we're the product. And so as long as we continue to be the product and we continue to utilize this and all the corporations need us, it's not going to go away. It's a necessary scenario. We just need to monitor, educate, and eliminate as much as possible and be ahead of them. And right now, in my mind, I think we're behind them.
I have a question for Dr. Amita. Amita, you rightly referred and beautifully referred and rightly referred that the any psychological behavior, change in the psychological behavior should be monitored And this has to be monitored either by the parents or by the teachers. I mean, mostly it is the responsibility of the two monitors, that is, parents or the. We have noticed in a lot number of cases, I have at least noticed, Ms. Pandit was under a lot of cases where the suicide takes place. There have been psychological jerks, arrogant behavior at times, submissive behavior at times, absolutely detached behavior at times. Yet, the parents in today's societies themselves are so busy that they are not able to make it and detect this particular behavior pattern resulting in suicide. A few days back, there were about 7 children, 6 children, they tried to commit suicide, and they came through that nobody watches their behavior pattern. In the schools also, it is very difficult for each student to be watched. Now, ultimately, same thing comes as far as Dr. Keith has said. He says that there are fantasies. Ultimately, the child's psychology and his fantasies are attracted by this unethical element. Everyone has a fantasy as you are a student of psychology and you're an educationist. So those fantasies are given fill-up to by these unethical in one form, either in form of dirty sex things and all these are their fantasies in which they are indulging. My submission is that in today's society, how do you monitor? Forget it. Eradication, the speaker said, is not possible. But how do you monitor the person who is being subjected to this? Who will monitor? And how to monitor that?
Thank you for that question, Shri Sipal Singh ji. I think the most important thing for schools today is parental engagement and child engagement. More than, I believe that content will happen with or without us, because it will happen in a coaching center. Unfortunately, it will happen somewhere else. What we need to do as schools, and we do, progressive schools do that, is that involve themselves with the socio-emotional learning of children, with the emotional compass of children. I think that's extremely essential, because if you are involved with children in a classroom, and if you have oriented and sensitized your teachers to believe that if you see changes of behavior, because suicides don't happen overnight. They happen over a period of, the actual suicide happens, but the coming up to the suicide happens over a period of time. And so it is essential that the moment that the teacher sees that the child either is not coming to school, that immediately within the next 2 days, you find out, why is the child not coming? Is there a health problem? And then also it is essential that you connect with parents. So if you see behavioral change, you have counselors. It is important that and every teacher is a counselor, because children don't like to go to some counseling unit. They feel labeled. So it's very important that every teacher becomes a counselor. You immediately call the parents, but it should be an open door policy for parental engagement in a school. At least I follow that. So that anytime a parent should know, who is my contact person? Let me meet that person. I think it is very wrong for principals or teachers to sit in ivory towers. Today, it has to be a wall-less school, because there are so many emotional issues. Children are technologically being controlled. There are sexual issues. There are issues of peer pressure. So we need to be there for our children, because they are our future. And the best way is to be consistently engaged, emotionally involved, and intimately connected with children through the parent faculty, creating peer groups of understanding so that the peer can also inform us if there are issues. I think it is a 360-degree approach that we need to prevent any kind of unhappiness that may happen to our children, because it's a tragedy if it does.
Mr. Chairman, Pavanji, you will try to, I'll take the discussion further. Here is the need of physical monitoring. You understand the child's behavior. Here is the need of involvement of the children, involvement of the parents and the teachers with the children. While the more and more emphasis today is on online everything, even grooming online, assessment online, everything online, education online, are not we deviating from the basic principle of man to man or parent to child or parent to or teacher to child interaction by such method which we are adopting. Because more and more we are going into online on it. Forget about the prevailing COVID days. Otherwise also, the emphasis everywhere is that more and more should be online examination, online assessment, online grooming, online practical examination. That means on one side, we are deviating from the basic interaction, physical interaction or psychological interaction between the parents and the children. What have you got to say about this?
I think technology will take its toll in any case because you can't escape technology. And we'll have to move with the times. When we were young, the things were not the same. Today, when our grandchildren are studying, the things are not the same. I have a couple of questions that just people want to be asking. So if I can move on, General Lumba wants to ask a question. So can you come on and please ask your question?
Thank you, Bhavan. Thank you. At the outset, may I compliment Dr. Amita? And since Keith is speaking on a webinar of NISSMAT, I'll call him Shri Keith Elliott. Fantastic talk by the both of you. Really good, and I've been totally engrossed. My compliments. Now, what I want to actually ask is the fact that, the anonymity that is offered by the internet and, the cyberspace, so to say, does permit a lot of sexual harassment, sexual crimes to take place. Whilst both of you have spoken about the defensive measures, as I call it, the child, the parent, the school. What about aspects that can be undertaken at the macro level? What about the society? What about the state? What about the laws? Can you give us some insight into these issues? Because these are also very important. Like Mr. Sipal said, that you have to hunt the predators. You can't just say that it is the responsibility of the parents and the children and the school. It is also the responsibility of the state. It is the responsibility of all of us in the society. What are those things that can be done at this level?
In continuation of that, one more line. The BPRD report says, Bureau of Police Research, their report says from 211 to 217, 211 to 216, in 5 years, the cyber crime increased 5-folds. You say in 5 years, 5-folds. And then they say that in 16 and 17, it has doubled. So again, I'm emphasizing on General Lumba says that what are the measures to eradicate these predators? I mean, irrespective of the fact that we know that this is the state of affair, it is multiplying, yet we are not able to do. Reasons being different, as it is pointed out, but case has pointed out that there are laws, international anonymity, and all that we'll discuss subsequently how the laws come. Vandaji will like to emphasize on that. But I'm only adding to General Lumba saying that how do you control, how do you curb, how do you enforce?
Before you answer
In my opinion,
sorry,
if I may.
before you answer the question, if you look at the chats, there is a very good question that has come up from Shamli Khurana, and I'll read it for you. She says, how to stop children from accessing these violent gaming websites or others too. We can talk to them, counsel them, or keep a check, but it becomes difficult as teenagers find it nonsensical talk and don't understand the consequences. We cannot control them all the time. Please suggest. Again, she's coming down to the same thing. As a society, as government, what can we do?
In my opinion, I'll just chime in real quick, is that I think it needs to be a top-down approach, and it needs to come from obviously government, but we need to hold business accountable. We can't allow the development of these games and then distribute them nonsensically. It's like same analogy as providing guns to everybody. Well, somebody's got to control the bullets because the guns don't work without the bullets, right? So you can distribute the guns, that's fine, but we need to control the bullets. And the bullets are, how is it implemented and what is business and how is business being held accountable by us, society, or by the government to stop this happening? Because the bad actors are out there and they're doing their thing, but they're doing it via business's platform. So what is business doing to prevent this? Because they hold the keys to this. If Zoom decided to shut this meeting down, or YouTube decided to shut this meeting down right now because we were a group of individuals sharing inappropriate behavior or otherwise, they would do it. So why isn't it being done on that level? And why does it continue to happen? And they can't say, oh, we have no control. No, you have 100% control. You have the ability to stop it. And we as a society need to empower government to make that happen so that government can affect business. That's my 2 cents.
May I add on to this, Keith, General Lumba, with your permission? I think, we have this huge angst when it comes to democracies because we get very angry if issues come up and we're told that, this is going to be shut off or Netflix is going to be monitored or this particular picture is going to be censored. So I think there's a whole activism in place also. And that is why, how do you draw a balance between autocratic behavior and democratic behavior? So we have to look at that. We have to do the balance. And that's why I'm consistently saying, okay, laws are there, but you wouldn't want to put your teenage son into jail. You wouldn't want that to happen. But at the same time, I think the most important thing is to develop value systems which have really gone from this country. I'm sorry to say. We were supposed to be, involved with all that. But I'm seeing that happen. I'm seeing children cheating all the time online. I'm seeing a lot of dishonesty amongst, within the adult community, within society, there's so much of corruption. And so I think, how do we do that? So the most important thing is to bring back the whole understanding, which I started with, of responsibility and accountability for one's own behavior. And that's how society starts, be the change, as he said in one of his passwords. Be the change you want to see. Again, we're throwing it out and saying, what does society? Wo khada hai samaj anda beram be nahm. Hum bhi to samaji hai. So who is that samaj? Very important to understand that we are part and parcel of all that is happening. We are doing the PUBG games. We are doing this. We are talking about, the Prime Minister spoke about PUBG in one of his meetings. The point is, we are involving ourselves. So the only way out is that in school rooms, we start looking at value education. We start looking at empowering children with the emotional compass, the value compass, and so on and so forth. Because society will carry on. The market is there. The market is there to ensure that you do whatever they want you to do. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Jasjeet, who's the sponsor of the event, actually, on Tag Scores. Jasjeet, if you can ask your question, please.
Oh, thank you so much, and a very insightful talk by Keith and Dr. Vatal. Thank you so much. I think for the audience today, this would be very enlightening, and most of them will take them home for their children or for their grandchildren today. So very insightful. My question to you, Dr. Vatal, would be that digital footprints, as we spoke about, are playing a very important role in actually seeing how people behave. We've seen exceedingly in C-suite hiring in corporates that people are looking at digital footprints, analyzing them and seeing whether they want a certain kind of a person in their organization or not. I wanted to ask you, in higher education, in new admissions, in probation of students or expulsion, how are you or the schools or the academicians overall looking at taking digital footprints into account while making decisions on new students, probations or expulsions? And is there any governmental policy around it that's coming up? So that would be one question. And just a small comment. I know academic dishonesty in this whole online game is a big issue. that's a problem we solve. So maybe we can help you on that.
Thank you, Jasjeet. I knew you'd be pushing yourself here in this. Clever boy. Is that question for me?
Yes, that question is for you. So just wanting to understand what's the perspective, what's happening in India, and what are your personal thoughts? And then maybe if Keith, you could add on to that, and what's happening in the US and Canada and North America, because usually all the social media policies and all start evolving from the impact that all these things create in the West.
So on a macro level, I think, when we've had conversations, there has been a lot of talk around the fact that we have to look at issues of hacking or plagiarism, because that becomes an integral part of the academic world. And yes, there are laws against that, but how applicable, how they apply, how effective they are, we still have to get our head around that. Because I know that firstly, it's very difficult to catch people. It's very difficult to pinpoint people and get them out there, and face the law. So I think there'll have to be far more stringent laws brought into our country, at least in India, to ensure that this whole online space, explosion that has taken place doesn't become a monster, so to speak, and we're able to sort of, at least if not, try to rein it in without reining it in, so to speak. Now that's again a balancing act. Having said that, so I put that away. The next thing is that, admissions, you normally admit children who are, by and large, admissions happen at very lower classes in schools. Because in at least in a place like Delhi or in larger cities, you change your wife, you change your God, but you don't change your school because admissions are so difficult to see. And so the thing is that admissions happen in nursery and kindergarten. After that, people don't leave. So the issue of finding a digital footprint for admission would not apply. The other thing is, that's a very interesting thought you've given, just. And I think for higher education, for research scholars, for students who are looking at PG level, it would be interesting, because that should actually act as a deterrent for sort of young adults to keep away from this and to understand the enormity of what they can lose with their lives or their jobs or whatever it is. And by life, I mean not life in that context, but life as far as their jobs are concerned. And so I think it's very essential that this aspect that you're talking about should be brought in should become a sort of integral part of the admission process. But then you see, again, we are a very, very large country, and admissions just happen bang with the amount of the cutoff points, this obsession that we have with cutoff points. As a result of that, admission takes place. I mean, there would be court cases if you said you've got 99, but your digital print shows that you harassed a girl. You say, so what? What's the big deal? So it would be a huge issue. So we have to actually bring such laws into place to sort of ensure that, how does it work? How do we go forward? And again, it's a democratic thing. How do you look at life? How do you look at people? So yeah, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Keith, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'll just chime in. So the doctor made a great point with respect to the fact that being good digital citizens, right? And that, I think that's paramount, is that it needs to be taught at a young age. And I know here in Canada that is taught, that from a very young age, when I've gone to schools, that's part of my teachings, is where my kids were young, I was being part of that. The schools brought that in, and they were teaching the children from early age on how to be good digital citizens. And also that bullying wasn't acceptable and all of those elements. Now that's easier said than done in some philosophies, but the schools here are taking it very seriously, and it does have dire consequences if you're involved in inappropriate behavior. It is suspension or expulsion, and it's looked at from a criminal point of view. It's no different than physically punching someone in the face or harassing them. You're counseling them to commit something or inappropriate. So it is looked at that way. The other step on that is just the ultimate responsibility lies in, again, I go back to the parents, is being engaged with your children and not dumping that responsibility on somebody else and saying, everybody's like, well, what do you do or whatever. You need to be engaged with your kids. And I would do random phone audits on my kids' phones. And if they weren't acting in the guidelines of that phone, then you lost the phone, and you take away the phone, you take away their lifeline, right? And having digital scenarios in sense. So it's the broken window philosophy in policing, that if you have one broken window, then that's acceptable to then spray paint the building. And then if the spray painting is available, then we're allowed the drug dealers to come in, and it has consequences. So you need to nip it in the bud and stop it very early on and have real consequences with respect to that cyber piece and police it. Our schools here are doing it. It's very part of the curriculum. There is a digital piece there that has that. It's hard in COVID with everybody not working off of platforms because they are working from home or from their residence. And so that's made it more difficult, but we will get back to there, and it will stay there. So I think progress is being made, but it's baby steps, and you can't run a marathon in one step, right? So.
The next question is from Mr. Pandit, who's the author of a book that he's recently published. Mr. Pandit, can you please come on?
Thanks, Mr. Pavanjit. I really want to thank the speakers. And my question is, you see, almost all the democratic countries guarantee freedom of speech, freedom of information under their constitutions. At the same time, it also guarantees freedom of religion and practices. Cyberspace is used by radicals, fundamentalists, and all other sorts of people. And you see, they could lure, coax, cajole, or as Dr. Amita said, groom children to induct them into certain folds and then exploit them to commit terrorist activities or violative of laws. I want to know, how can legislative changes control cyberspace? And the main problem is, can a comprehensive law be enacted? You see, we are sitting in sort of watertight compartments as far as the legislation goes and as far as the law enforcement goes. I had been a law enforcement agent for 26 years, and for the last 27 years as an advocate also. Mr. C. Paul Singh had been on the governmental side of investigation, Mr. Pavanjit on the private as well. You see, we are not in a position to strike a balance between the laws and the enforcement aspect.
Enforcement.
So many things come into conflict. How to reconcile it, sir? Thank you.
Keith, would you like to take it on, or Amita?
Could I take
I
on?
think I just would like to agree with whatever Mr. Pandit says, because yes, these are very important issues, and we are actually at a very, we are a threshold right now. And I don't think that we have these kind of laws, in place where the laws may be there. I'm not saying there aren't laws, there are laws. But the thing is, are they being applied? Are they effective? Because I mean, one doesn't really hear of a person, being caught for this kind of a thing, at least in India. One hears of a person being actually caught in the real world, a person who's spreading terror. But I don't seem to recollect whether I can remember in the news that, this person was sort of, into a sleeper cell or was involved with this and he got caught through the online. I don't think that the laws are really effective. They should be. We should do that, because you're right. We're in an online mode now, and as I said, we have to be very careful now as to what we're seeing, what we're doing, where our children are, because they can be anywhere and they're a threat. So that's all I would like to say. Keith?
I agree. And it doesn't.
Actually, after Keith?
Yep. So I agree completely, and it does need to be enforced. Here in Canada and in North America, it is being enforced. There are cyber criminal units, there are children exploitation units, we are making arrests, but it has a global impact because I said before, there's jurisdictional issues. So I can't arrest people in India. We need the cooperation of India to be able to facilitate that. If we identify those people, we need a global approach on it. We're addressing the issues here, and identifying those where we can and in cooperation with the United States and other countries, but it's not a perfect animal, right? It's difficult for us to have that global reach because we're not a global, we don't have that. So whether it goes from the top, from like United Nations, and it's being addressed on that level of stuff, or the G7 or the G20, those countries that are involved on that and approaching it from that point of view. And there is some traction in my mind. We are going in the right direction. More needs to be done. But again, it's a long road and it's a marathon, and we've started it, but it needs to continue.
You know, Pawan, I think if you could, you and Jasdeep, I mean, you're all in the security business. And I think taking off from what Keith has said, I mean, why don't you create these security charters and, approach states and say that you have an app or you have a procedure by which you can go forward and find out. I think it'd be very interesting. And I think these things would really work, in connection with state governments and others to, to lay out some kind of rules and procedures, at least state laws and so on. It would be important because we are in a difficult situation.
Absolutely. I think Mr. Sipal Singh wanted to add something.
No, I wanted to say only this thing. Only there are 2 points. It could divide into 2. One is legislation, one is enforcement. Mr. Pandit referred to legislation and then enforcement. Very rightly pointed out by Amita that enforcement is hardly there. Either there's no, because even the substantive laws like Indian Penal Code cases are not enforced. They are not taken to logical conclusion, and in case of IT Act, the theory is not taken. So the legislation part is first. No doubt legislation is there, but enforcement is not possible because of certain reasons, either evidentiary value or certain other reason. Second point is on the first point, Panditji, on legislation itself. Whether the legislation of a country is ipso facto applicable to other country. The internet, the cyberspace is a worldwide. This space is worldwide. Somebody commits a crime according to legislation of that country, then it's possible in that country. But conviction in other country will take, as you know, even for recent cases, same came up, I don't want to refer. You may say anything. Twitter might have violated many things, but is it possible to take action in India? It would take, we have to go to Interpol and all. So my point is that the legislation of country to country varies. Enforcement of country to country varies. The third most important point is that let us go by the point of abuse in terms of obscenity I take. I'll draw the attention of Dr. Meeta Mark that in our times, a book was published, Lady Chatterley's Lover.
Yes.
And that book was absolutely banned. With the passage of generation, the language and as far as the definition of obscenity changed. They said, no, the freedom of expression, you can't ban a book. So the question is that these things come up. So cultural behavior, the ethical behavior of country to country varies. And I 100% agree with Dr. Meeta that I think, Pawanji, this is very subject is very important. We had very scintillating discussion. I think we have to carry forward in terms of as to what could be done in terms of definition of the obscenity, definition of, because there are so many apps which Mr. Keith has pointed out, which are absolutely, he himself says, like, he says, OK Cupid and all, he has referred to that. They are, according to him, obscene. But is that country taking it and obscene as is banned it? No. Then this is international ramification. That very internet, that very app is used here in India. So my point is, this is entirely a different subject where we have to take in terms of enforcement, legislation first, enforcement, then whether there can be any world consensus. I only asked one question to Dr. Mr. Keith, he might be knowing, or Amita might be knowing. I think there have been international efforts. I think there have been international councils where they have tried to unite together to curb this cybercrime. If any one of you can refer to that, as to what is being done. Because as far as I know, there have been some councils have been created where they're trying to curb at international level discussions are going on that this crime should be curbed, particularly keeping in view the juvenile behavior in terms of either violence behavior or in terms of depressive behavior. Thank you very much.
So there definitely is platforms out there and corporate responsibility where culture is creating scenarios. I don't have them off the top of my fingers. It's not something I deal with in a daily basis, but yes, I agree. Mr. Singh, is that ultimately they are out there and they are progressing. There needs to be more of them. One point of correction is I didn't say the apps were obscene. The apps are fine. The content that occurs on the apps is obscene. And where back to my point is that's where their social responsibility comes from the corporation. Yes. Is if that activity is going on that application, they have a civil responsibility to prevent that. And I'm not worried about freedom of speech or otherwise, or democratic process or whatever. If inappropriate behavior is going on, you have to be the change. As I said before, you have to stand up and speak in that regard. And that was my reference with respect to corporations. They need to be able to do that.
I got time for one or two more questions, and I call upon Ronald O'Brien from Dubai to ask his question. Ronnie, are you there? I think he's logged off. Next question goes from Chirag.
Hi, sir. Thank you once again to all the esteemed panelists and speakers. So my question was to Dr. Mita. She had mentioned that she had taken certain initiatives in her school with respect to trainings, individuals on cybersecurity and all that. So great work there. So besides that, in terms of training and assessments, what are we else doing to kind of empower upskilled children, as was mentioned during the course of the discussion also, in making them digitally sound and digital citizens, so that they are equipped, and what roles actually teachers and educators play in terms of ensuring that these children are ready for the next interactions among citizens. So that's my question. Two parts to it. One is, of course, on upskilling students and children, and secondly, on how they are getting ready for becoming digital citizens. Thank you so much, Dr. Mehta.
Thank you very much for those. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for those important questions. One is that, considering that we had a lot of time online with children, and because we didn't believe that you should just be sort of drowning them in content. And so we were always conducting these sort of, get to know your cyberspace programs for them. And we were helping them out through courses in coding and creating apps. And the Atal Lab, which was created. So the Atal Lab Innovation Cell of the Niti Aayog was consistently sending us material and sending us information of how children could use their time through technology to create things. And so we were consistently upgrading the skills of children at different levels. So a lot of children did courses which we brought them in, which they didn't have to pay. Free online courses in a variety of things that they became more and more digitally savvy. Even to the fact that we helped them to conduct breakout rooms, create presentations, do personalized learning programs. So children were able to navigate a variety of apps which the teachers were using for training, so that they were able to create these marvelous online projects. And the online projects were all connected directly to real life situations. So we were giving them situations where if you had to beat the traffic, how would bringing in mathematics and say, how would you create an app that would help you to beat traffic control and so on? Or how would you do distribution of food in India? Especially it came when the farmers' protest came up. We did this whole experience and projects as to how would we do food distribution, what would we would, and so children did some marvelous projects and won a lot of prizes across the country, and not only in my school but across schools, to the extent that we created apps for the older generation, because we believe in the older generation was very lonely, especially the old age homes became very lonely. So we created an app where children were linked to grandmas and grandpas. These were adopted grandmas and grandpas from old age homes. And then they would talk to them at a particular point of time, do a helpline. So they felt very happy and bring them on. And then, just, they sort of shared a lot of conversations around this. So a lot of upgradation and a lot of principals have done some great work in this area. And so also we were very lucky because in all our programs, we brought in a global presence. So we brought in all our exchange partners. There was a day when I had something like students from 63 countries who were having conversations and about their feelings on the COVID, what they felt, debates, declamations. There were book readings, there were slam contests. So you automatically globally got very highly connected. So I think this question of yours was important, and I'm glad you brought it out because it really created a global community during the pandemic.
We were overshooting on time, but I still ask two questions. I see Ronald O'Brien has come back. Ronnie, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Thank you. This was a fantastic presentation, and thank you so much, all your speakers, not only the speakers, but everyone else who was involved. I listened very intently, and I was a child who was brought up by a single parent, and yet I felt that the involvement of parent, the liability of parents doesn't go away with this particular thing. So I made a small little formula, which is equals to D, brackets open, P over C, greater than CS. Now, what this basically means is the distancing of the parents over the children, when it is greater than the cyberspace, all this happens. In a nutshell, the children at all stages of life require mentoring, require someone who's there for them. If the parents don't have time, the children find alternatives. And the alternatives, I'm sorry to say, are through everything, every aspect of cyberspace, be it games, be it multimedia, be it social media, be it anything. Everyone, they're prying people at every stage. And this is all I had to say. I mean, this was my only take on the whole thing. I can make an algorithm and formula for absolutely everything you do, but this was my just take. I'll send it to Jajit later on, and the chairman, who can circulate it to everyone.
All right, thank you, Ronnie. And the last question goes out to Vrinder Garg.
Good evening, and thank you, Keith, Dr. Wattal, for this speech and the talk that you have given. And my question is basically on last year, as we are all aware, it was global pandemic, and the use of internet for education was on a higher side. The use of digital products and devices has also increased in the time being. We as parents, we were also engrossed and involved with our work because of a work from home thing that has came into place. So there is no time that means it is given to the children. So because we are working almost 9 to 10 hours, or maybe extending to 14 hours as well. So there is very less time. So just to involve our kids, it is the analysis is that most of the kids are using their internet or the other electronic gadgets or smart devices. So first of all, my question is that how smart means how secure are our smart devices or toys for kids? One, and on contrary, how much time should be allocated to those to the kids to use these smart devices? So is there any formula so that we can control and monitor them simultaneously as well?
Keith, would you like to take this on?
So absolutely, there's filters and resources you can utilize to monitor the time. I'm not a scholar as to what the acceptable amount of time is, so I'll defer that part of that question to my illustrious colleague, who is the educator. From a technical point of view, is yes, you can filter. So there's routers, there's use apps, you can lock down how much use they have. It's essentially coupons that allow you X amount of time. As to what that time allotment is up to the individual user. So you can set up your home router, and there's technology that exists out there that allows you a certain amount of gaming time, a certain amount of online surfing time, a certain amount of digital gaming time or chat room time or whatever. You can allot those. You can also filter websites, you can filter applications. It is all usable from a home router system, but you have to educate yourself on how to do that. And it's a lengthy process. And if you're not tech savvy, it's difficult. There is something missing on a one-click stop play. And then reality, for the most of us, our children are smarter in technology than we are. So they know how to bypass as well, right? So again, it goes back to that parental piece of interaction and seeing your kids and not just giving them the device and letting them have it at their own leisure. Is we need to engage that. We need to kick them out the door and have them go play and go see a friend or get off the TV or get off the device, because they're already doing it for 6 hours a day schooling during COVID. And then they're going to that for their downtime because they're not supposed to go out and they're locked down or otherwise, right? So we have to look at other outlets in that, and that's up to individuals. But with respect to what is the acceptable use, I'll defer to Dr. Wattal.
Amita, what is the acceptable usage time for children on the internet?
You see, it's not a question about time. It's a question about how you use the internet. It's about passive viewing and active viewing. I think that's where you have to come in, because if a child is just doing passive viewing of something, there is no development, there's no creativity, there is no innovation. But if there is some active viewing happening without, which of course is not active viewing, which is sort of, it's just not pure entertainment, it is a learning process, then it definitely will help the child in different ways. And when a child does active viewing, he doesn't really spend too much because he realizes that he is involved mentally in that. And I think it's very important also to ensure that, because children have become, their attention spans have finished because of the online. The attention spans have become very short because everything is moving all the time. Everything is sort of activated. So the synapses in their brain, the neuroplasticity of the brain has got affected. The brain has got rewired. And I can see that they can't sit for long. They can't concentrate for long. They can't, I mean, you know, all the time we're trying to create these exercises of breathing, of mindfulness, so that at least they calm down, because the net and moving pictures always activate these synapses. So that is why it is very important that we create these sort of, what shall I say, spaces for breathing, spaces for mindfulness while watching internet, while working on the net, or while surfing, or while browsing. And so we've been having a lot of workshops with parents and saying, when you go into a room, how much break do you give? We ensure that the nurseries and the smaller children do not get into online, because I think it's a tragedy because they can't even sit. And so I think there are different ways and means of how much time. I don't think, we've been trying in our schools that for senior classes, not more than 3.5 hours in the day, in the morning. So we create these sessions where and then every 45 minutes after that, there's a 10-minute break. And it's not necessarily a bio break. It's a rhythmic break. It is an aerobic break. It is a break to do some physical exercises. So you get out, you move out. It's an eye break because you look around and see, because a lot of children have started wearing glasses because it is constant viewing. So it's, it's affecting their bodies, constantly being there in front of the net. The self-esteem has gone in many ways because they have put on a lot of weight. So you have to, it's a 360-degree thing. You have to look at them physically, you have to look at them mentally, you have to look at them technologically. So that is how the school has to work at a holistic level as to how to make viewing more, not so challenging, but more beneficial for children.
Thank you so much. I see a couple of parents who are saying, thank you, Amita Vatal, for teaching my children. So congratulations to you. Now, before I end, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the event once again, the Tag Scores, who are the main sponsors, and the event was supported by Premier Shield, India Skills, Premier Consultancy and Investigations, JMD Cargo, and HubSpot. Now I'd like to hand over the session back to the President to give his concluding remarks and give a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Pawan. A very, very profusely enjoyable as well as learning session. Both the speakers. Particularly, I'll say two angles. One is the gentleman, Mr. Keith. He is indeed a forceful speaker. He has spoken at hundreds of seminars in Canada, and he indeed is a forceful speaker. There's no. And as far as Dr. Vatal is concerned, I have heard her earlier also. She has a thorough, absolutely thorough outward, inward knowledge of the education system. Now the question is, in this particular webinar, we have discussed that this is a curse, internet, and as well as it is in some extent boon. We have all been discussing this, right from the science is a curse and what is always goes on. Question is how not to compromise the children development. Dr. Mehta has referred to various ways, rightly so, because adolescent mind is more vulnerable. And particularly in this age, with these apps coming in, the vulnerability has become much more. And Keith has referred to various apps. He himself says that these apps are, of course, obscene and abusive. Yet, curbing it, closing it, is it possible or not? Is a question of, again, process of law and legislation and enforcement. So my point is that we have had two views. One is the availability of such huge number of apps, etc., which can corrupt the mind of the young adolescent. Second is the mind itself, the adolescent mind, which Dr. Mehta has said, how to engage them. So we are so thankful. It's a very scintillating webinar. And I feel we should take it forward in next summer webinar as to its how much we can do. And rightly pointed out by Dr. Malik, Dr. Amita, that I think the voices should go from various sections of society that there's something is to be done. Once we start saying that something is to be done, there may be some consensus globally coming up. There may be some curbs, some control. And that will be a great achievement. As a NISSMAT, we have taken a step towards this side. We have realized the concern, and therefore we chose this topic. I am so thankful to the speakers and the delegates from all over the world, I would call it, because a large number of countries have represented. And I am sure that they would have found this very scintillating, very interesting, very educative session. Our next webinar is also another that is the prevailing law and order and changes in business strategy. That is a very interesting, because law and order and the business strategy, the fluctuation of business strategies goes with the fluctuation in law and order. Sometimes law and order is adverse, the business strategist or chef has to get it down, the businessman. Sometimes law and order good, he has to develop it. The strategies goes on changing. This is our prevailing law and order and changes in business due on 26th Feb, same time. We are also have very learned speaker, as you will come to know. And I am sure that most of the delegates who have attended this session will be very willing to come and take part in this session. Thank you very much, everyone. Indeed, as the president, I'm grateful to all of you. Thank you very much, Pawan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir.
Thank you so much, Payal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pawan. Thank you so much.
And, lots of parents are thanking you, Amita, once again for all that you have done for them.
Thank you.
So you have a lot of good well wishes across.
Not to miss that there are equal number of people or more on the YouTube platform, and there are a lot of comments there about how great the session was. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for
Pawan Singh ji. Thank you, Pawan. Thanks, Jasjeet. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Dr. Wattal.
Thanks, Keith. See you.
Thank you, Sipal sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasjeet ji.
Thanks all of you. Thank you, really.
Right.
Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks.
Right. Good night, General Lumba.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
Pandit.
General Lumba. You are always with us.
Thank you, Chirag.
Thank you, Chirag.
You are always with us. Thank you so
Pandit.
much.
Thank you very much.
Panditji, thank you very much. Your question was very, very, very legal. So it needs I think, a more elaborate discussion the next webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
So somebody has written a comment on YouTube. It gives me immense pleasure to say that my kids are in good hands. Thank you, Mrs. Wattal.
Hello. Hello.